Good evening, and welcome to our program. I'm Gavin Cleesby, the Director of Programs, Exhibitions, and Community Partnerships for the Massachusetts Historical Society. For anyone who may be joining MHS for the first time, we are the first historical society in America, dating back to 1791. We hold a remarkable collection of manuscripts that totals close to 14 million pages and includes everything from the diary of John Winthrop describing the Arbella and harbor in England about to set sail and found the Massachusetts Bay Colony, to reflections on the COVID pandemic made by local school children in the last year. We make our research materials available to the public for free and host a wide variety of programs and seminars exploring all aspects of American history. We are only able to make our collections and programs available to the public thanks to the support of our members and donors. If you enjoy our programs, we hope you'll return for future events, and we hope you'll consider donating to support the work of MHS. Tonight, we have a great program that will explore 2 television explorations of First Ladies in American history. The current Showtime series, The First Lady, and the 2023-24 C-SPAN series, First Ladies, Influence and Image. We're joined by a fantastic group of people to discuss these programs. Talking about the Showtime series, The First Lady, our creator and executive producer, Erin Cooley, and showrunner and executive producer, Cathy Schulman. Erin Cooley is a graduate of Yale's Theater Studies program. He served as head of development for director Joel Schumacher for more than a decade, while also writing screenplays and teleplays for companies such as Lionsgate, MGM, Winkler Films, and Winkler Films. In television, Erin has created a scripted show for MTV, served as a staff writer at Netflix, and is now preparing a limited series with director Kevin McDonald. Cathy Schulman is also a Yale graduate. She's an Academy Award-winning producer. She has produced numerous TVs and movies, and her credits include Crash, the box office hit Bad Moms, the feature 5 Feet Away, and the hit comedy film Otherhood. She is the president and CEO of Welly Entertainment, a film and television production company committed to producing content that appeals to diverse audiences with an emphasis on women and girls. Exploring the C-SPAN series, First Ladies, Influence and Image, we are joined by Mark Farkas. Mark is a graduate of the College of William and Mary. He was the executive producer of the entire series, First Ladies, ranging from Martha Washington to Michelle Obama. His earlier work includes being the producer of the Peabody Award-winning series American Presidents, Life Portraits. He has also worked on documentaries taking viewers inside the White House, the US Capitol, the Supreme Court, and the US Senate. He has traveled to war zones in Iraq and Afghanistan for C-SPAN documentaries. Finally, our conversation will be moderated by Catherine Allgor. Catherine is the president of the Massachusetts Historical Society, a position she has held since 2017. Prior to coming to MHS, she was the director of education at the Huntington Library in California and a professor of history and UC presidential chair at the University of California, Riverside. She attended Mount Holyoke College and received her PhD from Yale University. This appears to be a very Yale-heavy evening tonight. And she has also worked as a historical advisor to both of these First Ladies series. So without further ado, I'd ask Catherine and Cathy Schulman and Erin Cooley to join us to get this program started.
As the president of the Massachusetts Historical Society, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we are the repository of the papers of 2 First Ladies, Abigail Adams and Louisa Catherine Johnson Adams. So it seems very fitting to have you here in our virtual room. And Erin and Cathy, before we get started, I understand you have a little something to show us.
We do. Go ahead and play it.
How do you really feel about being First Lady?
In 4 years, I don't want to look back and think, what did I become living in that house?
It is my great honor to introduce to you the First Lady of the United States. Oh, still got it.
Never lost it.
The First Lady has to be a special kind of woman.
I can't have you backseat driving.
They want to turn me into a Black Martha Stewart? I will pick my team, choose my causes, understood?
You knew what you were getting into.
You kept your political dreams a secret from me.
I'll be here for you.
But I am going to be myself.
My hands are tied.
Don't push me off. I am your wife, not one of your girlfriends. You are the husband of a wife who has a mind and a life of her own. They think I should keep my mouth shut.
This is your chance to make history.
I'm just terrified for my girls.
I couldn't bear to watch you destroy yourself.
I have done everything I was supposed to do!
The world is always going to judge us.
They can kick me out, but they can't make me somebody I'm not.
Wow, you guys, I have to say, I've seen the episodes, so I got chills. So just seeing the trailer, great. So listen, as a creative force here, I have to ask you, Erin, how did this project get started? Because it really started with your writing, yes?
In a way, a version of it did, but couldn't have gotten to where that is without Cathy. But where the original germ started, I mean, it was one of those symbiotic Hollywood things. I think where two of us, me and Cathy, in the same town, we're kind of thinking the same thing without realizing it. But what I was doing in 2016, I had just had a new baby girl, and I, had struggled writing little things that never got made, and I really wanted to write something for my daughter. I loved writing about politics. I wanted to write something about women in politics. And in 2016, everyone was talking about Hillary Clinton might be the first female president. And I had always heard this history joke about Edith Wilson, Woodrow Wilson's wife, being the first female president, because legend has it, he may have gone into a coma, she may have, taken over for him. And so I wrote this really fun, irreverent spec script about her, but it said on the last page, this is meant to be an anthology series about different first ladies. It would be a different one every season. It was really when the script, my manager, Brad Kaplan, gave it to Cathy, and she told me, I've been thinking of doing a show about first ladies, and maybe we can work together. But she really pushed us, starting in this first meeting we had in January of 2017. So that's how long these things take. For anyone out there who's an aspiring TV or film creator, have patience. From our first meeting, she was, pushing me, how can we update it? How can we make it more contemporary? Maybe how can we do first ladies that have a built-in bigger audience than Mrs. Wilson? How can we think about bigger themes? She had just started this great company she has, that I'll let her talk about, but that wanted to do, female forward stories. And she really pushed me to look at it as a great opportunity to tell a story that way, which was what I wanted to do for my daughter and my wife, but maybe didn't realize that or know how to do it. And we kind of started from there, and it really was a team effort, but I have to give Cathy credit for the idea of the three first ladies, interweaving them. We went through at least 15 different combinations. It was like, basketball team with X's and O's on the whiteboard. We had different photos of different first ladies. What are the three that fit together the best thematically, which we can talk about as we get further into the hour. But we had different forces who were coming on board the show, maybe pushing us towards certain first ladies that they thought were more famous or whatever. But we really thought these three we ended up with, we picked because they had so many similarities. They also had some differences, but they really were, we wanted to start with three very heroic women that found their voices in the White House, and that did a lot with the office. The interesting thing about First Lady is they don't have a budget, and they really are just, they don't have anything they're supposed to do. So those who do something with it should really be celebrated, because it's totally voluntary in a way. And so that's kind of the germ of the beginning of the writing process. Cathy saw this through all the way through that trailer and post-production. And so she should talk about her experience on this one.
Yeah, Cathy, what is your memory of the process, and how, and maybe even talk about a little bit about the choices that you made in your football team of first ladies?
That was the basketball team he was talking about.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I know. It was like, I was like, how did a sports reference make it its way into a first ladies conversation?
I can't help myself.
Anyway, no, but yeah, definitely. The story was exactly as Aaron told it. And, you know, but two other things had happened to me concurrently with meeting Aaron and reading his Edith Wilson script. One was that I was very close with, you know, Viola Davis, and she did a mean impersonation of Michelle Obama. As a matter of fact, she could do an impersonation of both Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. And we had, you know, oftentimes discussed that if anyone could ever play Michelle, it would be her. And I had also been very inspired by a movie I saw that Natalie Portman starred in called Jackie, you know, about Jackie Kennedy.
Right.
There had been one little aspect of that movie that really inspired me, and it was when she showed a press corps for the very first time the East Wing, which had been completely, you know, off limits, obviously. And as she, you know, brought this press corps through the East Wing for the first time, she pointed out, you know, Eleanor put this here and Edith put this there and Lady Bird had her portrait here, or whatever it was. And in that moment, it was like, oh my God, what if these walls could talk? You know, like, what did they actually experience in this building? And, you know, with a little bit of research that it hadn't changed much, except for in decor, you know, I literally thought, wow, all these people like slept with presidents here. I mean, not to be vulgar, but that was literally like went through my mind, like what pillow talk is where it's at, right? Like what really went on? And then I thought, well, what if we shifted the lens that we're so used to in American history of at least as I learned it, as I think it's oftentimes taught, through a very, you know, sort of male-facing lens and paternalistic, you know, lens. I wanted to sort of say, well, what about the wives and families that were there? Because I know that all decisions that are made in life are like the result of what happens with those closest to you, and wanted to explore a personal story on that basis. So that's kind of led us to try this idea of intersecting things, and also just to point out the march of time and where it's similar and where it's different. You know, that's so interesting as a historical society, obviously, you know, that what do we learn from history? It's sort of how we repeat things, you know, and how trends, you know, start to create realities, and how do we break certain patterns. And that required us, you know, marching across a lot of time really fast. And in in season one, you know, we cover 110 years of American history briefly through these intersections. As far as picking the three ladies, it started with Viola playing, you know, Michelle Obama, and you know, and thinking about, well, what defined Michelle Obama's time in the White House? You know, it's everything having to do with racism, anti-racism, segregation, desegregation, everything having to do with those issues as the first Black family, which led us right back to Eleanor, of course, where those conversations begin. And she is really the first modern first lady. So you want to start there. You know, she walked in and said, I need an office. Well, what for? How about I work? You know, and it was, you know, that led us to her. And then in talking, you know, looking into Eleanor, really, you know, in addition to, you know, early conversations and kicking, you know, the ball forward on desegregation, you know, all of her work about women's voices, you know, was so crucial, which leads us straight to Betty, because Betty, you know, many times over, you know, she's so interesting. She's barely there, but everything she does is with enormous impact. She's never, ever frightened, always courageous to do and talk about anything. And in a row, she ends up talking about, you know, women in psychiatry, and then women's health, breast cancer, ERA, you know, women, drug, alcohol, all these things. So it started to be a very natural triumvirate of three to talk about in season one, because as Aaron said, we wanted to really make the season thematically unified around the idea of voice, sublimation of voice, recovery of voice, use of voice.
That's great. Well, listen, before we bring Mark in to talk about his project, I understand you have a little clip maybe that gives us a quick and dirty look at the job of First Lady.
Please.
Gavin, can we set that up?
Yes, thank you.
Eleanor, aren't you supposed to be with the retired First Lady?
We're on our way. Will you make sure that he reads this?
Yes, of course. What is it?
It's my suggestions for cabinet appointments.
Okay.
Female ones. Where are we with the speech?
Well, not as far as we would be were there not 40 other things to do.
What's more important than the speech, Louis? It's tomorrow.
I know. We'll get to it.
Well, let me see a draft of it. I can cancel the first lady.
You can't cancel the first
I
lady.
can told her she couldn't. Lady. It's important that he lead with the cold, hard truth. Add some hope to it, but he needs to state the facts plain and simple. There are 30 million Americans out of work, and they don't want to be pandered to.
Couldn't agree more.
Left to his own devices, Franklin always errs on the side of optimism, but we need to strike the balance.
Mrs. R., Earl and the car have been outside for over an hour.
Oh,
Well,
goodness.
that's entirely unnecessary. I'm going to walk.
You're not walking.
Walk.
I most certainly am.
Mrs. R., Lou Hoover is waiting. We really need to go.
Yes, let's not keep her waiting.
Louis, when can we talk about the speech?
We will get to it this afternoon.
Well, I'm all booked up this afternoon.
Yes, I'm aware.
Oh, I see. I'm good enough to get him here, but not good enough to keep going.
You have your own schedule to worry about, your own duties.
Well, good. So he's finally decided on my job in the administration.
Yes, First Lady.
That's not a job, Louis. That's my circumstance. Shall we, Tommy? I need some fresh air.
Boy, that could be the tagline to this whole series. I need some fresh air. Let's bring Mark in. Mark, how are you, my friend? So you are on mute. So if you'll just unmute yourself, that would be great.
Hey.
So Mark had a very different. Hi, Mark. So Mark, because he works for had a different mission. You started off with a very ambitious project. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. Instead of taking 3 on, I know you all will do a lot more by the end of your series. We took on 45 of them in 2013 and 2014, from Martha Washington to Michelle Obama. Each week doing a biography of each one of the first ladies, talking with over 50 historians about the lives. And we call it First Ladies Influence and Image, because I see in the Showtime series, it is about their private lives living in that fishbowl. And it's about their influence on the president. And it's also about the image that they give out to the public, which is so many times important for the president as well. And so those 2 sides of the first ladies are what we got into. I'm going to concentrate a little bit on the 3 that the Showtime was talking about as well. But before I do anything else, I want to let some of the first ladies from our series do a little bit of the talking for themselves. It's a trailer for season 2. We split it up into 2 from Martha Washington all the way up to Edith Roosevelt. And then season 2 was the modern first lady. So this is the trailer for season 2.
If we turn away from the needs of others, we align ourselves with those forces which are bringing about this suffering.
The White House is a bully pulpit, and you ought to take advantage of it.
Obesity in this country is nothing short of a public health crisis.
I think I just had little antennas that went up and told me when somebody had their own agenda.
There's so much influence in that office, it would be just a shame to waste it.
I think they serve as a window on the past to what was going on with American women.
She becomes the chief confidant. She's really, in a way, the only one in the world he can trust.
Many of the women who were first ladies, they were writers. A lot of them were writers, journalists. They wrote books.
They are, in many cases, quite frankly, more interesting as human beings than their husbands, if only because they are not first and foremost defined and consequently limited by political ambition. Edith Roosevelt is really one of the unsung heroines. When you go to the White House today, it's really Edith Roosevelt's White House.
During the statement, you were a little breathless, and there was too much looking down, and I think it was a little too fast. Not enough change of pace.
Yes, ma'am.
That's great, Mark.
You tell me too many people, Lyndon Johnson said, yes, ma'am, too, or yes, sir, too. And, for us, all these first ladies, to me, were incredibly impressive. They're husbands' equals. And we had the opportunity to interview a number of them, all the living first ladies as part of the series, and got a real sense of the community and sorority of them, and sometimes not. There's some first ladies that just did not get along with other living first ladies, and some that really do. Barbara Bush and the Bushes loved Bill Clinton. They may not have loved the Carters as much. So it was a real challenge for us, but also fascinating look into a role that the first gentleman is going to take at some point, I hope soon.
So it's interesting. So you had to do all of the first ladies. So you didn't get to pick and choose like Aaron and Cathy did. But you also had this problem. I think if I remember correctly, maybe at one point the idea was to do a first lady a week, but then you found yourself, you and Susan at the time, hampered by the lack of material about some first ladies, especially, the ones in the 1800s.
There were some in the first half of the series that were a little bit tougher. I mean, Thomas Jefferson wasn't married when he was in the White House. James Buchanan was a bachelor, and so he had his daughter do the work. So there were some that we combined a couple of first people who played the role of first lady in the show and weren't the official first lady. And I know we talked about Eleanor Roosevelt being the first official first lady who defined the role, but I think, Catherine, you might also say that Dolley Madison may have been the one who started it all.
I might say that.
Yeah. But so it was so those were difficult. But once we got into the 20th century, into the film and television era, the hardest thing was actually to do a single program on, somebody like Eleanor Roosevelt. I'll start out with a clip from her. She's got so many firsts. But one of the interesting things when you watch this clip, we'll just play it and I'll say what's interesting about it after we play it. But go ahead and roll that clip.
Great, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking to you tonight at a very serious moment in our history. The cabinet is convening and the leaders in Congress are meeting with the president. The State Department and Army and Navy officials have been with the president all afternoon. In fact, the Japanese ambassador was talking to the president at the very time that Japan's airships were bombing our citizens in Hawaii and the Philippines and sinking one of our transports loaded with lumber on its way to Hawaii. By tomorrow morning, the members of Congress will have a full report and be ready for action.
Wow.
So to me, that is remarkable that the First Lady is speaking to the nation before the president speaks to the nation. And it speaks to Eleanor Roosevelt. I think Showtime made the absolutely right choices with their First Ladies. But how many firsts did she have? The first lady to hold press conferences. And you think about what that did for female journalists. Lorena Hickok, who I know is dealt with in the series, a former journalist, goes out and documents the New Deal for the FDR administration. So many firsts for Eleanor Roosevelt, and what a fascinating woman she was.
Yeah, we definitely make a meal of that moment. The discussion to the conversation she had with Franklin that led to her making that first address to the American people that you just showed. That becomes a good piece of an entire episode for us.
I'm wondering how you chose. Seriously, with us, with Eleanor, we had so much archival material. Our trip to the Pacific, all of her radio programs, and then you think about, in her lifetime, she writes over 8,000 articles. She's like the first blogger, frankly, that you have.
She had a column called My Day. Yeah. And Mark, I wanted to. You have a few more things to show us, but I wonder if you would think about this. What's interesting about your project, the one Susan and you spearheaded, it did. You talked about seasons. It took quite a long time to get through all 45. And what was the public reaction to that, to the programs, and did it change over those 2 years?
Well, we found that, frankly, we won the Peabody Award for doing American presidents. But every program we dealt with their First Lady. And so that seemed to take up, we were taking viewer calls and input from the public. And just as much of their interest was in the First Lady as it was in the president. So, and we also said, we've done a lot of series on, dead white guys or alive white guys. It's time to really take a look at women's history. And that's why we had, advisors like you, Catherine, and other female and other male historians to take a look at the role of First Lady. So we knew it was really time to do something, and it was popular. And frankly, this is the book that Susan Swain wrote. It's a fantastic book. It's a fantastic read with all the, it's curated with all the historians who spoke in the series, who really give you the inside scoop on each one of these first ladies. And so it's been popular. We've replayed it, and it's time not only with women, but it's time to tell the whole story of the country.
So do you have some more film clips you'd like to share?
Well, since Betty Ford comes up next in the lineup with Showtime, we've got a clip of Betty Ford, and this clip is very interesting. She is addressing the nation instead of Gerald Ford on the concession speech to Jimmy Carter. So let's play that.
Let me call on the real spokesman for the family, Betty.
The president asked me to tell you that he telephoned President-elect Carter a short time ago and congratulated him on his victory. The president also wants to thank all those thousands of people who worked so hard on his behalf and the millions who supported him with their votes. It's been the greatest honor of my husband's life to have served his fellow Americans during two of the most difficult years in our history. The President urges all Americans to join him in giving your united support to President-elect Carter as he prepares to assume his new responsibilities.
That's such an interesting clip, the way the camera shifts over to him while she's talking.
It captures, in a way, everything about the Ford that is just, it's an amazing American family story. Teenagers in the White House, a president and first lady who maybe he aspired to it, but maybe not. And a wife and an incredible first lady, as Cathy said, who's came out, spoke about breast cancer, which was a verboten subject during that time, talked about her, her views on abortion on 60 Minutes, which were not the president's. And really, one of the reasons I picked that clip was because, how the good that she did after she got out of the White House. I challenge any president to say that they did as much as she did after getting out of the White House with the Betty Ford rehabilitation, Betty Ford Clinic. And in that speech, her problem with addiction goes all the way back to the 60s when she has a husband on the road all the time. She has arthritis. She starts taking painkillers, and admittedly, as I saw in the Showtime piece, they have this intervention. And for the program, we talked with Steve Ford, the son, about that intervention. And it was just a really, really, I think, emotionally draining and hard thing for her and everyone to go through. But it really is a window into a lot of American families.
Yeah, very much of their time. How is that to handle, Aaron and Cathy, to handle those sort of controversial topics? Maybe not so controversial now, like going to a psychiatrist, or, but certainly the alcohol. And I thought, by the way, the depiction of it was very sort of period accurate. It was a very different time and a very different attitude toward alcohol.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, just for the writing part that I can speak of, and Cathy can talk more about the fabulous performance by Michelle Pfeiffer. But for the writing, I devoured. One advantage of starting it 6 years ago was on all these first ladies, we devoured. Really, Betty Ford and Michelle Obama, I'm confident we read every book written about them. Eleanor Roosevelt, there might be too many. There's hundreds of thousands of pages. But with Betty Ford, we read the two books she wrote, and various others written by journalists. We read Jerry's own autobiography, and so you really get a sense of what's true, and then you just try to make sure the holes you have to fill in, that they're emotionally true to what we know those people believed and what they were thinking at the time. And Mrs. Ford, so honest in especially her second book. Her first book's written really before she was public. with her addiction. She kind of just reveals it at the end. The second book, really, she wrote to try to inspire other people who had addiction issues. And so she's so honest in it. And that made it more possible for us to be truthful to her truth.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we, like, it's interesting that clip that you just showed, Mark, we obviously feature that moment, as well in the show, but what we really focus on is what happened before and after. First of all, Jerry lost his voice on the campaign trail, which is why she speaks for him, and when she does, she was under the influence of drugs and alcohol at that moment. And so Susan Ford's reaction to what happened that night, watching her mother and the pace of her speech and how she was speaking, really is in many ways the beginning of our story trajectory into the intervention, which happens, later. But we focused on trying to analyze these moments that happened on sort of proscenium moments that happened in the public, and then went behind the scenes to say, well, what was really going on there with the family and what were the events leading up to it and after it, and so that we could get into what is ultimately a very, I think, loving portrait of Betty's work with the Betty Ford Center, which is where we, end in terms of her particular trajectory in the series, and the amazing, the amount of lives that she's probably saved is, like you said, Mark, the level of that accomplishment in terms of what she was able to do for drug and alcohol rehabilitation, specifically for women and girls, is remarkable. So that's kind of where we land with that.
And actually, you got it. That was the reason I picked the clip, was twofold. One was the fact it was of import, but two was the speech. Her speech was slurred, and
that's right.
Yeah. So it's a window into, as you know, a window into everything you.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that you just showed, the same moment we focus on with our camera, which is when it moves away from her to Jerry, and you actually mentioned it, Catherine. Moving to Jerry and to Susan, that was our focus, right? Like, what were they thinking, in this moment? And you can see Susan kind of goes dark there, and she really was the, in many ways, the ringleader of all the intervention activities.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Mark, I know you've got one more for us, don't you?
So I got two clips, and I have Olivia play them back to back because they're both short. They're both Michelle Obama.
Great. Wonderful.
Come into this house and there is so much to do. There's so much coming at you that there's no time to think or reflect.
Hi everyone, we are here digging up soil because we're about to plant a garden.
I won't be satisfied, nor will my husband, until every single veteran and military spouse who wants a job has one.
At the end of the day, my most important title is still Mom in Chief. But what we've learned over this year is that hope is making a comeback. It is making a comeback, and let me tell you something. For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country. And not just because Barack has done well, but because I think people are hungry for change. And I have been desperate to see our country moving in that direction and just not feeling so alone in my frustration and disappointment. I've seen people who are hungry to be unified around some basic common issues, and it's made me proud.
Wow, you forget how powerful that was.
Yeah, so she got a lot of flack for that. And I picked both those because I actually thought that Cathy and Aaron might be able to talk about how they sort of the challenges that they had. Obviously, one, just playing Michelle Obama, who's an icon in and of herself, showed all the things that a first lady has to do, the power of her ability to make a speech. And then the issues that first ladies get themselves into, that one in Wisconsin about being proud of America. There was a lot of behind the scenes fighting that went on between the East Wing and the West Wing with that sort of got handled after that. You didn't see Michelle Obama doing as much of that out of the campaign trail, maybe a little bit more coordinated messaging, but it's all, they're very, very strong personalities, and they've got their own minds to think about and say what they want to as well, but it's a fine line. as you all know.
What an it seems so antiquated now that people were so negative about that. And now today, you know, I know our kids in schools are having their eyes open more to the fact that this country's history isn't so squeaky clean, and that we maybe shouldn't always be proud of our country. And I feel like her saying that was so advanced and so kind of forward thinking now that I hear it again.
Yeah, and it was said with such, you know, good intention, but yeah, it got turned totally, you know, on its head, which we, you know, dive deep into in the series. And, you know, she's essentially called an angry Black woman for, I mean, she's actually called an angry Black woman, you know, for saying those words, which becomes a total spin out, you know, ending in a magazine cover with her, you know, dressed as a terrorist. And, you know, we focus in ours on the emotional devastation of that. You know, she's having to face, like you said, you know, the reactions to her actions and intentions as being, you know, there, she was there to, you know, support her husband on the trail, you know, and then it turns completely dark for both of them. But then more, as importantly, what does it do to her as a human being? And it was enormously difficult for her to, we believe, you know, for her to crawl back out of that and get active again, which she did. But, you know, to be so deeply blamed for something that, as Aaron said in this moment, is so completely obvious to so many Americans that it's hard to understand how to love your own country if you don't happen to be white and male and middle-aged, you know, and that's really what she was dealing with.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you know, creating a show about someone who's lived the experience of Michelle Obama, I was terrified to, I think at first I told Cathy, I don't think I'm the right guy to work on this show, to write this show. But what I realized, what we realized about the process of television, my job originally was just to help write a story that sells the show. And then when we wrote the show, it would actually be a whole team of different diverse voices with different perspectives. And we have so many great different voices and different people with different perspectives that run the whole gamut of America and the world on our writing staff. And that's something that I'm really proud of and excited about with our show.
Yeah, that particular, you know, episode worked on by Black women and Black men was really a fun one to, you know, deep dive into. And when I say fun, I meant fun in terms of as
in a creative way.
As a creative challenge.
Yeah.
I didn't mean like the situation was grotesque, but the process of trying to drill down into that. I mean, she came off stage because in the room, it was such a gigantically positive reaction. And she came off to like her whole team getting texts and things that things were blowing up in the media already over what she said. And it took them a minute to even figure out what the heck had happened. And it was the, if you're proud of your country for the first time, you never were before. It was that extra sentence that she didn't actually say, but that was the, you know, implied. And then the chaos that created for another year in her life, at least, if not more.
And Mark, when you did that episode, she was First Lady.
Yes, she was.
Yeah,
She wasn't
it's a second term. Yeah.
Yes, she's currently, yeah, she was. And I just want to say also, Catherine, you mentioned it a couple of times, Susan Swain was the host of the program, and obviously worked closely with her on this. And I hired a very, very, actually female staff to produce the programs, and each one of the shows was represented. I don't want people to think that, you know, I have all the answers on First Ladies, because I don't, but I find it a fascinating topic. And I do look forward to the day where we have a first gentleman, because it's, you know, one of the things that Laura Bush talked about in our interview with her was, okay, well, when you have that role reversal, are they going to be critiqued for their clothes? Are they going to get a salary? What's going to happen?
Are they going to be forced to quit their career like Michelle Obama was?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so these are, these are societal issues that we'll see. But
you know,
it's a great topic.
I love that this First Lady study persists thanks to people like you all, because it's really actually a funny category of analysis. So one could argue that the presidents, like from George Washington to now, a very disparate group of people. Yes, they're male, yes, they're white, but as far as like their religion or their backgrounds or region of the country, they're all over the place, but they all have something in common, with the possible exception of Warren Harding, I think, and Gerald Ford. They all decided they wanted to be president at some point. I mean, that intention is what links them together. But of course, for these ladies, up to this point now, ladies, they don't have that. I mean, there's this great moment where in the Showtime series where they're fighting, and we saw a little bit. He says, "You knew what you were in for." Well, in the scene, she says, "No, I didn't," because nobody marries a guy and says, "This guy's got to be president," with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton. Who knows what she thought? If anybody thought it was Hillary,
She thought she'd be president, let's face it.
But, you marry either a politician or a tailor or some guy in business or something, and then you find yourself, as you say, have Eleanor Roosevelt saying, "This is my circumstance." So they're an interesting group of people because nothing really intentionally links them, except they all find themselves in this position.
I think you're right, although I think, I'm sorry, I would just say the one thing that sort of connected all of them for us was this look at where women's history was at that point, right? They may have not had that in common, but they represented that point throughout the series for us, and so it united them.
Yeah, I think there's also they tend to be unified in their pursuits of social activism. I mean, it's really interesting, and I think probably as a result of the fact that the men are involved in politics all day, every day in the West Wing, they do have the ability to get out and go understand the people and work on social activism in various different ways, and most of them do at one point or another, get involved with that. And also they're able to get around the country, which we're able to do too. We didn't get stuck in the East Wing, because they move around a lot. But I think it's interesting for us, we found it sort of funny that in our first season, nobody really wanted to be there. I mean, Betty was kicking and screaming, against going there. Michelle was sure they were all gonna, end up murdered, which fairly so, and thank God nothing horrible happened. And Eleanor, I think if she wanted to be there at all, it was as president, certainly not as somebody's wife. And so I think it's interesting that in our very first season, we didn't even have anyone who ever wanted to be there, let alone the fact that they end up there. And like you said, Catherine, you sort of show up, and I think it's really interesting and unifying too that they tend to be these are interesting men who marry interesting women with lots of agency. And then they kind of lose it the minute that they're asked to walk through that threshold, right? They walk in, and then somebody says, start organizing some parties and pick a porcelain, or china pattern. And that's so tricky. You really are told stand behind, and then they have to find their way, and I think that's where you start to see the similarities, because most of them do, find agency.
Yeah. No,
I was just going to say what I always found fascinating about, because we looked at their whole lives, and they just aired an episode about them as young women before they meet their husbands. And what I always found fascinating about Eleanor and Michelle, a similarity, is that there was a period in their marriages where they were the breadwinner, where they were more successful than their husbands. I mean, Barack was her intern, and until his book was being reprinted after the DNC speech in 2004, before that, she was making a lot more money than he was. And of course, Eleanor kept the idea of the Roosevelts alive during the years that FDR was on the shelf, trying to learn how to walk in public again.
Oh, that's a great point. Listen, we're very conscious of time. We've got about 14 minutes left, and I'd love you all out there to get in on it. I already have some questions, but give me your questions, folks. And let me start with actually suggestion for you all. And we will not charge you for this good advice. We have an anonymous attendee who says that given that the First Lady tells 3 stories in an episode instead of splitting them up in separate arcs, our attendee suggests a future season. And I totally support this one. For example, I would like to see one with Dolley Madison, Helen Taft, and Hillary Clinton, and/or one with Mary Lincoln, Edith Wilson, and Nancy Reagan. So that is just free advice. I don't know if
get my notepad.
Yeah, they're great ideas. Especially the second one's easy to see. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Yeah, we will design additional seasons on the basis of theme. So that's what we're looking for, ways to connect them, so that we can, it could be anything. It could be scandal in the White House. It could be eve of war. It could be race relations. It could be anything. This particular season was about voice, but yeah, we're really always excited, and please stay online and let us know who you want to see and why. We actually are welcoming
Showtime and tell them you want to see it.
do.
That's right.
Please
That's
do.
right.
Go on our page and please do, because it's important. Yeah.
Mark, this is something for you, not a question, but a little trivia or trivium.
No.
One of my anonymous attendees says, did you know that C-SPAN founder Brian Lamb escorted Lady Bird Johnson to the East Room as part of her daughter Linda's wedding? The footage was part of a special Once in a Lifetime produced by the White House Naval Photographic Center, public domain, which features a young Dan Rather, formerly of Showtime parent company CBS, as a co-host.
Oh, I do know that, and I've actually seen the whole entire thing. Brian Lamb, if you're watching, I've seen you dress up at a Halloween party with a little black hat on your head, and he was a very good friend of Chuck Robb's, because he was a naval attaché during the Johnson administration.
It's great.
It's a hoot to watch the thing.
Jonathan has a great question, especially since we saw that great clip of her doing this. Curious about the significance of Betty's background in modern dance and her story, including in the White House.
We do. We definitely, delve into that. Kind of one of the things I wish we had had even more time to do, but she oftentimes refers to the career she may have had that been the direction that she went. And we visited her, during that time, and understand, how progressive a life she may have been headed for had she not taken the turns that she did. And, she says a lot that Martha Graham was her mentor. I think they had a very controversial relationship, when it was actually happening, but she learned really important things. And I think that it was to live in the moment and and she says, to experience every minute as a moment in the flow of life, or the motion of life. And one of the things that was so interesting is how Betty was able to always be present and conscious and react on a dime to other human beings and what was happening around her. And it becomes a very essential part of her character. So I think that dance background, besides making her so beautiful and graceful and talented, also, was a way of life.
Yeah,
I think what I always loved about that story, just real quickly, is she clearly, I always pictured it as a dramatist as having a little bit of a grudge, because she had Martha Graham back to the White House to win the Presidential Medal of Freedom, or one of those that Jerry put around Martha Graham's neck. And I can just imagine it's, Betty standing there saying, yeah, see where I ended up? And you thought I was only good for the B group.
That's right.
Well, we never ended up doing that. We wrote that, though. Remember? Yeah. We didn't end up shooting that little piece of.
Oh, that's too bad. I love
that little piece of that little jigger there.
We might have written originally a 24 episode series. There's just too much.
Yeah. The whole process for us was one of paring back. It was really difficult. We had 10 hours to tell some bits of the history of three women's 40, 50 years of each woman's life. And it was that was the most challenging and difficult part of the process, to try to do that. And I think, it's always going to be, controversial what we did or didn't pick. And, and it's really hard, to do it and to do that with, it leaves them with 3 hours and about 10 minutes each.
Yeah.
But
they're not that democratic, but that does happen.
Well, can I just jump in? I have some more questions here. Yeah. One of my attendees wanted to know if you'd watched earlier Showtime historically inspired drama series like The Tudors or The Borgias, and then also said, since every piece of popular media is a product of its time, how do you think the First Lady would be different if premiering in 2007 or 11, like the shows that did then?
Well, wouldn't have Michelle Obama.
Well, no Michelle Obama, but it's interesting. It was a different, so Mark, your series ran, what were the years?
2013 and 2014.
13 and 14. So we're talking about sort of earlier times. How do you think it would have been different had it been there wouldn't have been Michelle Obama, but in those time periods would have been a different kind of thing?
I'm not sure too much different, only because when you take a series that, that spans the history of our country's time, you have to take a look at big trends and also dig in with each first lady. And so there has to be an arc, something that I think connects the whole series. So, there'd be adaptations, as there always are, to technology and the use of media. I mean, if the series had started with the Roosevelts, I would definitely taken a look at the White House as that the place where you can get your message out. I mean, that's where messaging began. The White House, the power of the White House. So it'd been a different series than with Martha Washington. But for us, I'm not sure it'd be changing too much, but we'd have to update it.
Yeah.
I just would say I don't think we could have gotten this show made at any other time. I think what I was just going to say about what Cathy was saying about how much material we had and getting it down to 10 hours. I'm just so proud to be associated with something where each of these three first ladies who's never even, or it's been years since they've had features made of them, we got 200 minutes on film of each of their stories, which I don't think in Hollywood would have been possible even 5 years earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's just what it's take. I mean, look, I just, specifically, even working with like a female filmmaker, and we had one female, direct all 10 episodes, oddly enough, the very first job I worked on in the movie business was Catherine Bigelow's second movie. And I thought, oh, well, look what this is going to look like. We're going to, I'm going to like have this career where I'm going to like write and direct and produce and be a woman. And I didn't even work with another woman for another 22 years. So it's like, we are still so much on the precipice, and the idea that we got a show made about middle-aged women at all, let alone the first ladies, was remarkably difficult. And we couldn't have even done it then. So, and there would have been less ability for us to be as open-minded as we were. I think we would have suffered a lot more censorship than we did. And
I have to say, though, I did an American Experience, maybe 2012-ish, on Dolley Madison. And it was a big deal that this was an episode of this series that had a woman's name in it. Dolley Madison.
You're not wrong. Like that's the point. Like it's still so fresh to even be doing content about, let alone for women. It's which is weird, because primarily the marketplace for content for film and television and streaming is very much female majority. It's way over 70% of the marketplace at this point, but we continue to make movies and shows for men, even though they watch less of it. But we're still working through that whole, kind of revision of our process. So
yeah,
I think that's I would just say one thing that you all hit on, that actually, if we had to do it over again, with COVID and the impact on the mental health of this country, with teens and everyone, our interview with Rosalyn Carter was one of the most impactful interviews I've ever been a part of, where she talked about her mental health initiative and how it just got kicked to the curb. She attended cabinet meetings, and she really was ahead of the curve, the whole entire nation, on this topic. And if I had to do it over again today, we might lead with her, because it's so important.
That's so interesting. My gosh, yes. So listen, we have time, I think, just for about one more question, but it's a good one, and it's for all three of you, because you all three had a challenge in that there are always moments that are private or difficult moments. And how do you handle them when you're either being fictional or historically, doing a historical fiction, or when it's the truth? And how do you do it in a way that's respectful, but also truthful? And in the case of Cathy and Aaron, dramatic. So I'll just throw that out to all of you in the last few minutes.
I'm just going to chime in first, because mine's easy. They have a much harder job to do. Mine is you get the historians on who tell the stories that are documented and have been documented all through time, and you tell them truthfully, and you make sure it's a balanced perspective, and they're fascinating. You can't make it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is easier with the historians, though there would be people that would say just because it's true doesn't mean you need to talk about it.
Oh.
Indefensible, I say, but there you go. But how about Aaron and Cathy? How did you handle things that were private moments or things that might be a little tricky?
Well, sorry, there's like somebody's trying to get my attention here. You know, this is how we approached the process. We basically created these kind of profiles of each of the women, and based on the behavior that was historically recorded. And we started to analyze that almost like novice therapists or something, to try to understand how the women generally reacted to things in various different categories, where they were most open, where they were most shut, where they were most liberal, where they may not have been, all the different ways that they could have, you know, approached things. And so what we would do is we would create these, you know, profiles. And then when something came up that we couldn't know the truth about, because it happened at a time that wasn't documented, which was the point of our series, it was in between, it was interstitial, we would try to apply the behavioral norms of that first lady to the way that she would react to something, so that we were honoring and staying true to the tendencies, which is what we thought was the best way to sort of be appropriately accurate. But like you said, you know, drama comes in identifying, you know, conflict and flaws. So the trick was, you know, to make people be real humans, and no human is perfect, that anyway that I've met. And it was to try to do that, but at the same time to be honoring and honoring the overall perspective of the lady, and truthful in terms of how we approach choices that we might not actually have access to. So that was our way of managing it. And the actresses, you know, that's what they did. You know, they sort of worked by these little codes that we created for each of the, you know, parts, and then, you know, did whatever independent research they could too, to honor truth.
And all I would add is, you know, we're doing historical fiction, and, you know, this is not meant to be documentary. There's a great series that was on C-SPAN a few years ago, if you want the documentary version. You just have to write with confidence, you know, going back to Greek dramatists and Shakespeare. There's been historical fiction. You have to write from, you know, your more emotional core and what you believe these women must have been feeling and thinking. Obviously, you're not going to get 100% right, but we had such a smart, diverse team of strong women, experienced in the world, experienced with having a lot of pressure and leadership in their own lives, that I think we had a lot of women like Cathy who really could draw upon their own experiences in these kinds of situations to make it truthful.
Yeah, and you know, Aaron Sorkin said something, you know, when asked this question kind of repeatedly, because he's always working with historical fiction, and you know, he said, we're working on a painting, not a photograph. And I like what he said. You know, he's a very, very, you know, credentialed Hollywood screenwriter, and that is our approach, was, you know, how do we interpret, because that's what a painting is like, how do we interpret what it is we see before us?
So we're going to start closing out now, because we're right at 7 o'clock. But Mark, you started to say something. Did you want the final word?
One addendum, which is our biggest challenge sometimes, is interviewing those former first ladies who are still alive, and who had, you know, with Laura Bush, she was in a car accident. Somebody died in that car accident. So how do you approach that in an interview with her, and do it in a tasteful way, in a way that, you know, you don't lead with it, obviously. But so there's challenges like that, because as Cathy said, they're all human beings, and there's not a perfect one that any of us have met yet. And the challenge is to get both those sides to them.
Yeah. Well, now listen, everybody, I just got to tell you that in the questions and answers, there's lots of compliments. People are really enjoying this. So it seems sad to say goodbye, but thank you, Mark. Thank you, Cathy. Thank you so much, Aaron, for being with us tonight. And thanks to everybody out there. I hope you had a wonderful time, and let's hope spring comes our way soon.